Hello, I'm Trevor Lai in Shanghai. China is now one of the world's largest economies, so it's easy to forget that it's still an emerging market in many ways. Most private companies were started after 1990, and even the more established state-run enterprises are new when it comes to marketing. Both are competing with global brands, which are often older and well-funded by multinationals. We'll examine the challenges facing local marketers as they build new brands, and our own PT Black will take a look at a few Chinese brands ready to go global. But first, we'll speak with Rupert Hoogewerf, Chairman and Chief Researcher of the Huron Report, which just published the list of the top 100 most valuable brands in China. Rupert, what's the most valuable brand in China?
The most valuable brand in China is ICBC now. It's just taken over from China Mobile, who's been top of our list for the last 5 years or so. And so it's quite a big day for ICBC.
And Huron publishes this report every year. Who are some of the biggest winners and losers compared to 2010?
Well, I mean, if you look at the sectors that have been doing really well, and on the top 100 most valuable Chinese brands, it's been real estate or property. It's now number one. So I think it makes up 26% of the top 100, followed by financial services. And then you've got apparel or clothes. They're doing really well. And IT services come up. And then there's a little made in China specialities, things like cigarettes and baijiu and beer, and they've done very well. But I mean, the ones that are on the up are IT, is clearly on the up, and the ones on the down is clothes, because they're still growing, they're just not able to keep up with everybody else.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned real estate is up, and it represents such a huge percentage of the total list, because obviously last year with some serious government intervention, there seemed to be some worry about that sector.
But it's the brands here that you're talking about. So I mean, if you look at a branded real estate development, if you're a consumer, because our list only looks at B2C, so it's only looking at brands facing consumers. So if you're a consumer and you're thinking of buying this flat, and the developer says to you, oh, by the way, we've got this lovely clubhouse and look at the swimming pool, right? You can, if you're buying from a branded, you can feel, developer, you can sort of feel quite confident that that swimming pool will have water in it in 5 years' time. Whereas if you're not buying from a branded one, then chances are the guy's going to take your money and then forget to put some money into the clubhouse. And you end up having a beautiful clubhouse that's closed, you know, and 12 hours a day and doesn't have any water in the swimming pool. So if you compare like for like, branded versus non-branded real estate developer, the brand ones probably sell for anywhere between 30 to 100% more than somebody's absolutely bang next door to them, just because of their trust that they've accumulated.
But in terms of this value, I mean, doesn't the health of the entire sector have any impact on the brand premium that you're mentioning here?
Well, it's because China last year shifted 8 million units of properties. So I mean, that's an enormous amount. So it's like a fast-moving consumer. It's like an FMCG pretty much in the West. I mean, 8 million units of anything is quite large, and so, you know, even though it's slowed down a little bit recently because of some sort of big government intervention, I mean, you're not going to take away from the fact that a company that's doing $10 billion of sales, like the Fanker brand is, that their brand is still very valuable. I mean, I think we valued their brand at 26% of their market cap. That's not insignificant.
And so do you see that trend for at least that sector continuing this year, or, I mean, we're already partway through the year?
In the way I see it, you've got another 15 years before the real estate brands will start sort of falling away. And there's going to be a big shift around. I mean, the ones the top 20 brands that you see today, I think they're going to be shifting around in position. There might be one or two new guys who you can break in. But for the best part, I mean, that top 20 brands is there to stay for the next 15 years. And so put your money there, you won't go wrong.
And were there any big surprises this year?
Well, the big surprise from my point of view was when we saw the IT companies come shooting up. And the top IT companies, actually, most of them are privately held as well. And the top IT company is Baidu. And we valued their brand as 50% of their market cap. So that's about $20 billion as the value of the brand. And that made it this year more valuable than the Bank of China brand. And the Bank of China brand, obviously it's a much bigger company, but Bank of China, we valued the brand at only 15% of their total market cap, which has also ended up being around $20 billion, but just a little less than Baidu. So Baidu is now broken into the top 5 most valuable brands in China today, and that's a phenomenal achievement. But when you talk to the sales staff on the street, and you're trying to work out, well, look, what does the brand actually mean for Baidu? Can you sell something else? Can you sell another search engine? The answer is it's very difficult nowadays, because the end users are all getting more and more used to Baidu, so you might even have another search engine breaking into the market, which so-called has better services, but because of habit, they're not going to want to change.
But can you talk, that's a very interesting comparison, because you've got a huge institution in the financial sector, and then you've got this high-tech upstart. Yet their market cap, a huge percentage of it, as you've calculated it, is based on their brand. What does that actually mean when you're saying the brand represents that percentage of its value, or that dollar amount?
I mean, this is a critical point, but it basically means that if you've got a choice, and you will choose this product rather than that product, and for every 100 kwai that you spend, 50 kwai of that will go into the brand. Let me give you a better example, that one that's easy to understand, is let's take cigarettes. Now, when you go into a supermarket here in China, and you can probably see behind every counter, you'll see about 20 to 30 different brands of cigarettes there to choose from. And the average cigarette packet will cost you 2 kwai. And so the luxury brands, like let's take Zhonghua, which is the most valuable cigarette brand that we know of, and they cost 75 kwai. So that's a 73 kwai difference. Now, all the other brands are there on the supermarket shelf, just you are actively making that choice, in the case of many of the entrepreneurs, of buying the Zhonghua, the most expensive one that's available there in the channel. And so what I'm saying is that 73 kwai difference between the most expensive and the average packet is pretty much all brand. Okay, we accept that there's probably a little bit better product quality. I'm sure that the leaves that they picked are slightly juicier and fresher and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, most of that is going to be brand value. Give you another example, something that's very easy to understand, is let's take a Baijiu. Now you've got Maotai, you've got Wuliangye, you've got Yanghe. They're the three really big and famous ones. And Maotai put out a new premium brand the other day, which is called Maotai 30 years. So it's been bottled and sitting there for 30 years, apparently. And they racked their prices up by 64%. And if you go to a department store and you're trying to buy a bottle of Maotai 30 years, and it's now gone up to 20,000 kwai a bottle. Now, an average bottle of Maotai probably costs about 500 kwai in a department store. And then you've got the 30-year stuff. And a lot of that, again, is just going to be brand. So if you can really put your prices up that much, then and successfully shift through your channels, then you've got something amazing there.
And you've been tracking this list for many years. Who are some of the brands that you've seen and been really impressed with in terms of how they've built their brand over the years in a very systematic or perhaps even exponential way?
Brand I'd say that's really impressed me has got to be Tencent. And they've not only got a huge user base, but they've actually built an element of loyalty, which means that for anybody else to break into that market, and it's going to be very, very difficult to, because they've just got such a massive user base behind them. But they've also been quite canny with their marketing. So, of course, the personal experience is the first way you build your brand. It's a good product. But they've also been doing some rather big events like the Guangzhou Asian Games. And they were one of the chief sponsors of that. They were quite active in the expo in Shanghai. And so these type of sort of mass events has been a very good way that they've been actually promoting their brand over and above their rivals. And we saw it in the Olympics. We saw Sohu, and they had a big peak during the Olympics, 2008, when they were the official sponsor of the Olympics. I think that was also quite impressive. But perhaps on a slightly different one is that if you look at the foods and the drinks peoples, like Wahaha, and they do water and children's drinks and foods, and they've been very active on television, and they're splurging, I think, 30 to 50 million US dollars a year on CCTV alone, and just trying to get their message out. And that's all. When you've been doing that for 10, 15, even 20 years, obviously growing at quite a fast rate. Just that advertising amount sort of accumulates a certain brand value by definition as well.
Is that pure advertising, or are they starting to create branded content to build the brand?
Well, they had such a strong first mover advantage, so that they created a product that seemed to go down quite well with the consumers that they were targeting, which are especially second and third tier sort of families, second and third tier city families, and then they got their channels very quick. And then for other people to come in and start competing in the same channel, i.e. the point at which the brand had to be strongly differentiated, and the other brands have really had to sort of fight an uphill struggle. And my understanding is that they've been doing a lot of experience marketing, and they've been doing stuff on the internet as well. But I'm not very familiar with that.
So what are some of the other big challenges that Chinese brands face when they're trying to build their brands, and perhaps they haven't hit the top 100 yet, but maybe they're down and trying to climb their way up?
Well, one of the things that strikes me is that if you're trying to explain to somebody outside of China who these brands are, I don't think anybody's heard of any of them. I think you'd be challenged to find an Englishman in England who's heard of more than 2 of those brands. Perhaps Qingdao beer, because in their Chinese restaurant in England they serve Qingdao beer. Perhaps they've heard of Haier because it's been in the financial press as being very big somewhere in the world, but it's not in the streets in London yet. And Lenovo, you might argue they've got an element of global, they've got a global appeal. But again, not everybody would know them. You've heard of Dell, but not that many people know Lenovo necessarily. So one of the challenges, I suppose, is it's a much more competitive market here in China. And these brand values are big. I mean, you're talking the number 100 to get in the list is not far off $1 billion US. I mean, it's probably about 300 million US dollars, but it's in that sort of direction. That's just the brand value. It's a lot more competitive than people make it out. People think they're using the social media, they're using television, they're using print media, they're using events, they're using mass sponsorship of huge events like the Olympics or the Asian Games or Expo, and to quite effective ways of doing it as well. And they're not paying very much because they're canny and they know their market. So for a foreign brand that wants to come in and probably do the same sponsorship, they might end up paying a lot more than a local Chinese brand.
And do you think that makes it harder for newer upstart brands to gain recognition very quickly? For example, in the West, we saw a period of time when Microsoft and the likes of that dominated, and then you saw the tech upstarts come up, and all of a sudden a lot of smaller brands, the Twitters of the world, the Facebooks of the world, and the Googles of the world, gained a lot of traction very quickly. Do you think that's harder in China?
I think it's in IT with the speed of the social media. Sorry, I'm starting again that bit. I'd say you've got to take into account seriously the medias that's around, because if you've got a traditional medias, it's very difficult for a new young brand to break into traditional media. But we're going through a bit of a revolution at the moment with the social media, and so the fast newcomers that come into the social media in a very strong way, they have a huge advantage. And whether you're new or old, it doesn't really matter. It's a new media platform, and whoever's going to be big in that is going to be big whatever.
Great. Thanks, Rupert.
That's right.
And here's PT Black with a thought or two about Chinese brands that have global potential.